Hi, I am your host, Dr. Chase Raymond, and with this podcast, I hope to bring you a fresh perspective on leadership and the strategies you must take to be an effective leader. We will focus on what it takes to lead today so you can achieve tomorrow's goals. Hello, everybody, and thank you for listening to Leading for Today. This podcast is designed to develop and maintain existing leaders, but it also is to inform those who desire to be leaders. And today's episode is titled, So I Have Been Promoted to a Leadership Position, Now What? And with this episode, as you may suspect, I want to talk to the individual who may have a newfound interest in leadership and wants to know more. I also want to speak to the person who has just got promoted to a leadership type role and may not know exactly what it means to lead a group of people and what it entails. And then, of course, I want to speak to those who are seasoned leaders, because it's never a bad idea to refresh your memory and develop your leadership abilities. So I will be discussing what is leadership and hopefully provide some understanding on the differences between leadership and management, and what steps you can take in these early days of your new position to help you become more of an effective leader in your organization. All right, so this podcast is titled, So I Have Been Promoted to a Leadership Position, Now What? And many of you who are listening to this podcast are already leading others in some capacity. Perhaps you're leading a team, a department, a division, or even the entire organization. But then again, some of you who are listening may simply just be interested in knowing what it is or what it takes to be a leader. These days, the term leader and leadership is frequently tossed around in about every type of organization and context. But unfortunately, these organizations tend to misuse the term or overuse the term or even abuse the term, simply because they do not develop their team members well enough to understand what leadership is or what being a true leader truly entails. So perhaps you are in a current leadership position. Maybe you are considering applying for a position that requires that you lead others, or you are simply in that need-to-know stage. Regardless of the situation, I think this podcast will help answer some questions about leadership. By the time you complete this podcast, you'll understand that leadership and being a leader has little to do with the title, the power, or even having authority, but so much more about you and the people you lead and the goals and the objectives that you plan to achieve. So if you are asking, what is a leader? Can I be a leader? And what does it take to be a leader? I ask that you stay right here and I'll try to address those questions. So when I talk to my students or when I consult with others, I often ask them to think of a person at some point in their career, of a person that they believe was an effective leader. And the frequent response is maybe a supervisor or a manager, maybe a team leader. And sometimes they'll say maybe like a pastor or even a youth group leader. But when I ask them why, I'm frequently met with maybe a shoulder shrug or a blank face. And it seems to escape them why they were a good leader. Or maybe they just honestly don't know why. But if I dig a little, I'll discover the reason they think that these people are good leaders is because they were good managers or nice supervisors, or maybe they were just nice people that were nurturing or had a high level of concern. Maybe they helped them a lot in some way when they needed it most. And they would not be wrong using these type of descriptions. The truth is the term leader and leadership is so widely used these days that we tend to lose the true understanding of what leadership is and what a leader does. So let's first get a good understanding of what leadership is and by looking at a definition. So first, let's just go to the old dictionary, Merriam-Webster. And they define leadership as, quote, the office or position of a leader, the capacity to lead, and the act or instance of leading. Well, right there, it's no wonder people do not have a good idea or a grasp on what leadership is about. That is a horrible definition for Webster to provide its readers. So now let's look at how leadership is defined by scholars inside the field of leadership. Robbins and Judd, they tell us that leadership is the ability to influence a group toward the achievement of a vision or a set of goals. Gary Uckel, he explains that leadership is the process of influencing others to understand and agree about what needs to be done and how to do it, and the process of facilitating individual and collective efforts to accomplish shared objectives. Then Peter Northouse, he says that leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals toward achieving a common goal. So these three leadership scholars and these three leadership definitions, and if you were listening carefully, have a common pattern. Leadership is a process. Leadership involves influencing others. Leadership happens within the context of a group, and leadership involves achieving some sort of shared goal or a shared objective. It's a process because there is a relationship that exists. That is between the leader and the followers, or in other words, the team of people that this leader leads. And like any relationship, it is a process of developing things like trust and understanding. The team needs to know that the person leading has integrity, has ethics and morals. They need to know that they're competent. In return, the leader needs to lean on a variety of feedback to understand how effective their influence impacts members of the team. So it is a very transactional type of an event, meaning if you are in a leadership role, you meet this criteria in a positive way, then in return, you're going to gain the interest, the respect, and the recognition of the people that you lead. All right, so I also suggested that leadership involves influencing others. And this is one of the chief responsibilities of leaders. We influence people in order to rally them around a goal or maybe an objective or some sort of particular cause. Leaders also use their influence to motivate their team, encourage them, and to engage them toward buying into a particular interest. Simply put, leaders use their abilities to achieve something. So, as you can imagine, with this type of influence, this is why leaders need to be highly ethical, moral, and have integrity. The next part of that definition suggests that leadership happens within the context of a group. And this is pretty obvious, but it means you cannot be a leader and not have people to lead. Leaders do not exist without followers or team members. And keep in mind, groups can range from two people all the way up to the size of a nation. Last but not least, the definition suggests that leadership is about shared objectives, shared goals. This means as leaders that we must be able to clearly define or lay out a set of objectives or goals for those who we lead. Perhaps these goals or objectives are handed down from a manager, or maybe it's someone in charge or from the CEO himself. Perhaps you individually see something that needs to be done, and you individually, as a leader, set forth some goals or objectives for the team. Regardless of who establishes the objective or the goal, it is you, the leader's responsibility to communicate with those who you lead and to explain it in such a way that it's clearly laid out. And I will add to this definition by saying that as a leader, it's also your responsibility to be a source of encouragement, a motivator, if you will, to encourage team members to come together as a unit to achieve these objectives and goals. Each time this happens, you as a leader fosters a stronger, more productive team. So there is your definition of leadership or what it means to lead others. It's a process. It involves influencing others. It happens in the context of a group. And all of this is because we need to achieve a shared goal or an objective. All right, so you may ask, how can I become a leader? Can I be a leader? Or where do leaders originate from? The role of being a leader can be formal or it can be a very organic process, meaning you can be appointed as a leader of a group, or you can emerge as a leader organically among a group of people. In formal situations, you're selected because of your merits, your competency, and your ability to connect with others. On the other hand, we may find an individual that rises to an occasion during a challenging time, and that garners a lot of respect among the team. Or maybe there is somebody who is very knowledgeable and competent. They quickly become a source of information or somebody they can lean on in times of need. And now they become a leader because they are highly revered. Whether you're formally recognized as a leader or you have emerged as a leader organically, your definition of leadership is still applicable. The mission is still the same. And so, to answer your question, can you be a leader? The answer is yes. Anyone can rise to become a leader. We learned a long time ago, among us mortals, there is no such thing as a born leader. Leadership is not embedded in our DNA. However, every person who has learned how to become a leader, or I should say an honest, effective leader, embodies certain characteristics, such as having core values, ethics, morals, integrity, and competence. And as we just discussed, a leader can be appointed or they can rise organically. So, yes, you too can become a leader. The question you should ask is, am I ready to be a leader? The reason is quite simple. You may be full of integrity, you're most highly ethical and moral, and you're a stand up person with all sorts of knowledge and competence. But leadership is a complex and demanding role. You may have the capability to lead a team, but are you ready to absorb the responsibility and the scrutiny that comes with the role? Leaders are needed to lead others towards the mission, the goal, or the objective. And if you fail, are you capable of dusting yourself off and inserting yourself back into the battlefield? As a leader, you are frequently sought after for guidance, instruction, knowledge, insight, foresight, and understanding. With this comes the need for high levels of energy. So ask yourself if you had the energy it takes to lead your team. Another thing to consider is the contextual demands of the leadership role, meaning you may be highly competent and knowledgeable about a particular thing, such as, say, nursing, and highly capable of leading a team of nurses. But if the context of your leadership role should change, let's say you're moving from nursing and now you're being requested to lead a team of administrators, will your leadership be as equally effective? Will the new team find you as competent and influential? And these are good questions to ask yourself, simply because only you would know the answer. I'm not trying to be discouraging. I am simply making you aware that yes, you too can become a leader, a very good leader. But do be aware that being a leader is not for everybody. All right, welcome back. Today's topic is really focused on that individual that needs a general understanding of what being a leader entails and what leadership is all about. Or perhaps they have recently been promoted or hired into a leadership position, but they need some guidance. But this episode can certainly be for seasoned leaders as well. Nobody is perfect, and there is no shame in getting a refresher course on leadership. This just makes you that much better of a leader because that shows you actually care about what you do. So, in this episode so far, I defined and outlined what being a leader is all about. I've also answered the question, can I be a leader? And the answer was yes. But in this next segment, I want to expand on the role of a leader, by explaining the difference between a leader and a manager. This sometimes leads to confusion or some grayed lines. And so I want to explain the difference between being a leader and being a manager. And as someone who may not have a clear understanding of what leadership is about, or you have been recently placed in a leadership position or even a managerial position, this is highly important that you know the difference between these two classifications. So, at the top of the episode, I generally define leadership as the ability to influence people to achieve an organization's goals. However, management is much different. Peter Drucker really kind of outlined it best when he says that management is a multi purpose role that manages the business, manages managers, manages processes, manages procedures, and manages the workers. And managers do this by staffing the team, delegating responsibilities to people, and organizing and planning each of these particular tasks. Managers are focused on completing a task or some type of function. They provide order amongst the chaos, if you will. Where managers are focused on completing tasks at hand, leaders are focused on fostering relationships, influencing the team, motivating team members, and utilizing a problem solving mindset like critical thinking or systems thinking to address challenges or launching innovative ideas. Leaders also help their colleagues understand the goal. They ensure that they had the knowledge and the tools necessary to accomplish the goal or provide them with motivation as they do so. So there is a clear difference between leadership and the role of leader and management and the role of being a manager. And I will add one more thing, something you may want to recall. People follow leaders voluntarily, whereas people follow managers because they must. So, in a nutshell, there is the difference between leaders and managers. Another question that I get quite often is, can managers also be leaders? And that is a good question. Management and leadership skills is something that can be both taught and learned. But like me, I am sure you have had a manager at some point in your career that demonstrated no leadership skills or abilities, the same things that we described here in this podcast. Managers like this are very hyper focused on the mission or the objective or the task at hand. Or worse, they are micromanagers frequently hovering overhead. Maybe in your experience, you had a manager that threatened subordinates with coercive action if objectives were not met. Or maybe they used psychological warfare against their employees by using gaslighting or intimidation tactics. These are all examples of toxic management behaviors. But if one or all of these abilities of the manager were used by the manager, it reveals that that individual lacked leadership skills and abilities. And there is a saying that goes that all leaders can be managers, but not all managers are leaders. And I believe this to be true, simply because while a person can learn both management and leadership skills, a leader is a leader by virtue of the leadership that they demonstrate. The contemporary demands being experienced by organizations, from staffing issues, supply chain challenges, generational differences among the workforce, and several others, our organizations need managers to ensure that objectives are met both smart and timely. At the same time, our organizations need leaders to ensure that its people work together as a team. Workers' concerns and needs are addressed, that people are encouraged and motivated towards that shared vision. Also, the organization operates like a smooth, functioning machine as it marches forward towards its objectives. And it would be a perfect situation if organizations were able to hire candidates that possess all the skills of a manager as well as all the skills of a good leader. And it would be also great if organizations placed equal emphasis on developing the leadership skills of its people as they do managerial training. But sadly, this is not always the case. Just as I have explained to you in this podcast, there is a clear distinction between the role of management and the role of leadership. Organizations need to realize this as well. In the not so distant past, organizations primarily focused on hiring those with a management degree or MBAs to sort through the chaos. And while managers did address problems such as financing, marketing, or production challenges, they eventually realized we also need people in our organization that understand the people we employ, the mindset, what motivates them, how do we influence them towards a vision, what makes them tick. And leaders are at the center of each of those questions. So, to answer the question, can managers also be leaders? I still stand by what I said earlier. All leaders can be managers, but not all managers are leaders. However, I'll caveat and I'll say if managers took the initiative to develop their leadership skills, or if organizations provided managers the ability to go to leadership development training, I do believe managers can be effective leaders, but it will take time, effort, energy, and development. All right, so if you are at a point in your career where you feel you are ready to lead others, or maybe you are seeking a new position or have been recently promoted to a leadership role or even a management position, it's vital that you understand what it means to be a leader and what it means to manage for these very reasons that I listed just now. Organizations need strong, effective leaders up and down the hierarchical ladder. All right, to wrap up this episode, I want to address the last question, and that is what can I share with a person that has been recently promoted to a leadership position that can help them be better leaders? Well, unfortunately, there is not a simple answer to that question. Leadership requires a broad set of skills and abilities, just like any professional position. But I will offer you a few suggestions that I believe can help you be a more effective leader at the onset. First, take the time to get to know your team or those who you lead. Over time, when you begin to talk to them over breaks, when you're walking through the office and you sit down with them, you're going to understand what drives them and what motivates them. Also, you need to make time for your team members. Keep in mind, leadership is about leading people. You're not leading robots or machines. You're not pushing numbers. So it's important that you provide some time to reach out to your team members so that they can discuss any concerns, share achievements, or anything that they need to address. The point is, when you reach out and converse with your team, do so with a great deal of focus and intent. Also, this is known as active listening. This demonstrates that you care about what they're saying. Nothing else matters at the time. And this is what you're going to be relaying to them. And this fosters all kinds of positive energy, and it also fosters strong relations between you and your team members. Third, I would say be honest and be ethical. I don't think I can overstate this enough. Honesty, integrity, and ethics is the cornerstone to any good leader. Without these things, you are not a good leader. Number 4, be supportive. As a leader, one of your chief responsibilities is to provide your team members with whatever is necessary so that they can be successful. Or at a minimum, you need to at least be able to point them in the right direction. For example, if they need equipment, tools, training, education, or even advice. Next, whenever your team members accomplish an objective or achieve a goal, big or small, make sure that you take the effort to acknowledge their accomplishments. This goes a long way. Number 6, establish clear and attainable objectives or goals. By establishing goals that are clear, you omit any ambiguity or confusion from the mission. By making these goals attainable, you are not setting your people up for failure. And number 7, foster an environment of feedback. This simply means you need to provide feedback about their performance, but they should also be given the opportunity to give you feedback as well. This ensures that everyone on your team knows where they are doing well, but also areas where they can make improvements. For you, it's always good to know where you can use honest feedback to improve your leadership. And last, I'd like to say for you to remain humble. When you rise to a position of leadership and people constantly look up to you and maybe they hold you in some sort of reverence, when this happens, it's easy for this to feed your ego. So try to remain humble and remember that you are not there to win popularity, but you exist so that others can succeed, all for the benefit of achieving the mission of the organization. Like I said, if you're wanting to lead, or if you have been recently promoted to a leadership position and you're seeking out how to be an effective leader, there is not a simple answer to that question. But I believe these 8 suggestions will set you on a path to positive leadership behaviors. And for those who are new to leadership, I will leave you with this quote from General Douglas MacArthur. A true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He needs not set out to be a leader, but become one by the quality of his actions and the integrity of his intent. You see, leaders do not exist to manage a situation or oversee a task. Instead, leaders are needed to harness their skills and their abilities to foster greatness in people and to motivate them toward finding success. And I believe that most of us can be strong, effective leaders, but you must continually work and work hard to develop your leadership skills. Have a wonderful day, everyone. And until next time, I'm your host, Dr. Chase Raymond. Thank you for listening to today's podcast here on Leading for Today. I hope each episode gives you insight on how you can lead your team and your organization toward achieving important goals and objectives. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a rating and a review. And please tell your friends about us. Until next time, I'm Dr. Chase Raymond.